Christians say Jesus is one person with two natures, fully God, fully man, and they say he died on the cross. Simple enough. But two technical doctrines they use to protect that claim quietly destroy it. I'm going to use nothing but their own definitions. Watch. Start with the Orthodox framework, set at the Council of Chalcedon in 451. Christ is one person in two natures, divine and human, without mixing them and without separating them. To keep that from collapsing into heresy, theologians added two precise doctrines. Those two doctrines are where the trap is built. Doctrine 1, en hypostasia. It means the human nature of Christ is en-personed. It subsists inside the person of the divine word, the Logos. The human nature is real, but it has no independent personhood of its own. Its person is the divine person. Hold on to that. Doctrine 2, en hypostasia. The human nature cannot stand on its own as a separate person. Because if it did, if the human nature had its own personhood alongside the divine person, you'd have two persons in Christ. And two persons is Nestorianism, a heresy they explicitly condemned, so the human nature must never be its own person, ever. Now put both doctrines together. The human nature has no person of its own, and it cannot have one. So the only person it has, the only subject it belongs to, is the divine person of the Logos. There is no second human person hiding anywhere, one person in Christ. And that person is God the Son. Now the cross. Jesus dies. But here's the hinge. Death is something that happens to a subject, to a someone, a person. We don't say a nature died. We say a person died. So ask the question their own doctrines force. Whose death is this? Which person is the one who dies? Follow the logic. The human nature can't be the dying subject by itself, because it has no person of its own, and hypostasia forbids that. So the only person available to be the subject of this death is the divine Logos. The one who dies is God the Son, which is exactly the thing classical theism says is impossible. God cannot die. So here's the fork, and there's no third path. Horn A. You accept that the person who died is the Logos, then God died, and you've broken divine impassibility, the doctrine that God cannot suffer or change or cease. Horn B. You protect God by saying the human nature died on its own, by itself, but a nature that dies as its own subject must have its own person. That's a second person in Christ. That's Nestorianism, which your own councils anathematized. Affirm it, God dies. Deny it, you're a heretic. Your own doctrines built this box. Now a sharp Christian has a comeback, and you need to see it coming. They'll say, death isn't annihilation. Death is the separation of the soul from the body. The divine person stays united to both the soul and the dead body the whole time, so the person ceases to exist. They'll invoke the communicatio idiomatum, the sharing of properties, and say the Logos died according to his human nature, while his divine nature was untouched. So, they'll say, God didn't really die in the sense you mean, but that escape splits in two, and both sides cut them. If the person never ceased, lost nothing essential, and the divine nature was completely untouched, then what actually died? You've redefined death until it no longer means death. It becomes a word with no content. Or, if you say something real genuinely died, then by your own in hypostasia the subject of that real death is the divine person. You can't have it both ways. Either death means nothing here, or God was truly its subject. Choose. And that's the result. En hypostasia and anhypostasia were invented to protect the incarnation, to stop it collapsing into two persons, but carry them to the one event the whole religion hangs on, the death on the cross, and they force the very outcome they were built to prevent. Either a second person, Nestorianism, or a God who genuinely dies. The repair becomes the rupture. Compare this to the alternative. The oneness of God, Tawhid, doesn't need two natures, doesn't need to shuffle persons around to decide who died, doesn't need to redefine the word death to survive its own cross. It's simply coherent. When one position needs this much machinery just to avoid contradicting itself, and the other needs none, that's not a small detail. That's the tell. Thanks for watching.